Hey there friends, thanks for joining me again. And today I want to talk to you about a new addition that we have to the homestead. Some little baby chicks. I have been keeping chickens for a really long time. I believe that we got our first flock the day before Thanksgiving 2010. So yes, we've been keeping chickens for a really long time, and over that time, I've made a lot of mistakes. We've done some things right, we've done some things wrong, and they're gonna be really loud in the background of the video the whole time, so just to let you know. But basically, I wanted to just sit down and do a really quick video with you right now and just go through some of the things that you'll need to start your chicks and, you know, just stuff like that. It's just stuff that you can avoid so that you can not make some of the same mistakes that we made, so that hopefully you can be a chicken pro right from the beginning. So let's talk about the 6 things you're gonna need before you even bring your chicks home. The first one would be housing. They need something to live in, and it's not gonna be a big chicken coop outside. Ideally, what chicks live in is a brooder, and that's just something that you can keep inside somewhere because they do have to stay nice and warm when they're first, hatched. So somewhere, in your house. I've done this several places in my house. I've done it in my living room. I've done it in my dining room, in my bathroom downstairs, my laundry room downstairs, back when we had a basement. This can be in your garage. It doesn't really matter, but it does need to be well sheltered so that it's away from any kind of cold drafts or anything like that, and a place where it can stay nice and warm. So ideally, chicks want to stay about 90 degrees or maybe 95 or so, for the first week, and then they can kind of handle more temperatures that are colder than that after that. So yeah, just somewhere nice and warm is pretty ideal. And the house itself doesn't really matter that much. I've seen people do it in like some big like totes, for storing things. I've seen it done in boxes. That's what I'm actually using right now, is a great big giant cardboard box. I've seen it a lot of different ways. You just need something that's flat, something that doesn't have any stairs or anything like that, just something that they can live in for a little while until they get bigger and stronger and, have more feathers to where they can regulate their temperature a little bit more. Personally, I like boxes because I can just save a box that I've already gotten for free, and then, just have them live in here for a while, like a couple months or so. And then I make sure that it's like big enough that they can handle it when they're small, but also as they grow. So you definitely want something that is big enough that when they get too warm, they can move away from their heat source. We'll talk more about heat in a second, but something that they can move away from their heat if they're getting too warm, or closer to their heat. So you don't want something too small. And then you definitely want something that's going to be tall enough so that as they get bigger, they're going to learn how to fly. You don't want something that they can fly out of. So that's why a big box is my ideal thing to keep them in. But again, it can be done in anything, and you can even transition along the way. You can put them in something smaller in the beginning and then kind of like, get something bigger as it goes along. But, I've learned that I just want one thing to keep them in for 2 months or whatever until they're big enough, and then move them out to the chicken coop. That way I don't have to keep dealing with it. So housing is definitely something that you need to have in place first. The second thing would be a heat source. So there's 2 main ways that people heat their chicks. There is the heat lamp, which, is really common. It's easy to, find. They're inexpensive to buy. Just a heat lamp fixture plus a bulb of some sort, usually an incandescent one, because those are the types that heat the best, they produce the most heat. Some people get the red ones because they're shatterproof so that you can get water on them and then they won't break, but as long as your water source is away from it, this probably shouldn't be an issue that much. Be careful if you choose the heat lamp option though, because it is extremely common, unfortunately, for either chicken brooders or even chicken coops that are heated that way to have fires. And unfortunately, we have fallen into that trap too. So if you do choose a heat lamp, make sure that it's secured to the side of your box or tote or whatever it is you're using securely in your chicken coop, and just make sure that it can't fall down, or the chickens can't fly up into it, or debris can't hit it or anything else. Nothing that would cause a fire, and that it's far enough away from the walls and other things like that so that it doesn't get too hot, so that it doesn't set anything on fire, because again, it actually is very common, unfortunately. And then the second one would be a heat mat. So this would be the same type of heat mat that you would use when you are starting seedlings. And so you can put that just underneath their bedding, and then when they're cold, they can lay on the spot where it is, and then you need to make sure it's a big enough, box or whatever you're using, that they can also move off of it. So if you're using the heat mat, make sure that it doesn't cover the whole thing, and that it covers no more than half, so that they can regulate their temperature and move around. Because if they get too warm, they'll die, and if they get too cold, they'll die. So this is pretty important. So a lot of people will go ahead and put a thermometer in their brooder to make sure that it's the right temperature. Personally, I think that this is an extra step that really doesn't need to happen. If you have a big enough area for them to live, they can self-regulate. When they're colder, like I said, they'll move closer to it, and when they're hot, they'll move away from it. So as long as you have a big enough space, honestly, I think it's just fine to skip it. If you're gonna keep them in a garage or something and you're worried that they could get too cold even with their heat lamp, you might wanna go ahead and use the thermometer. But again, this is optional, and it really depends on a case-by-case basis. My chickens are living here in my dining room right now. I'll probably be moving them to my, garage here in a few weeks once they get a little bit bigger and they can regulate their temperature a little bit more, but right now I'm not worried about it. So we forego the thermometer since it's already warm in my house anyway. Anyway. The next thing you're gonna need is some bedding. Now this one is actually very controversial. Some people swear that you have to use something like pine shavings or something like that because it's absorbent, it's easy to clean out the cage, and that stuff that's flat like newspaper will hurt your chickens because it can get slippery when it's wet, or that, because it is such a flat surface that they can get leg or, foot problems. And so honestly, I've done both, and I've started several flocks on either, and I have not noticed any difference. The only difference is when I've used pine shavings, I've had to have something to buy, and when I've used newspaper, I've had, stuff that was free. So I know there's going to end up some people in the comments with their own opinions, and that's totally fine. I completely respect that. I just want to let you know my personal opinion on this is that it really doesn't matter. So if you want to just use some regular ordinary newspaper, it's totally fine. I have a chicken who is 5 years old now, and that's pretty old for chickens actually. And she still doesn't have any leg or, foot problems. So I honestly don't think that there's any difference. But again, I know that this is a controversial subject. So yeah, just, some sort of bedding, something that's going to be easy to take care of and clean, because you will want to do this probably every day or so, just to make sure that, your chickens are nice and clean and that they don't have, any issues come along with their health because of, soiled bedding. The next thing is going to be food. So I just buy a great big, bag of chick starter, and that's what I use. In the past, I thought, oh, these tiny little chickens, they're not gonna eat that much, so you buy a small little bag. The chickens are eating machines. Like, that's what they do. They eat and grow, and then later on, they eat and lay eggs. So buy a lot of food for your eating machines, because you're probably going to use it. And it makes more sense to me to buy one big giant bag and then use one bag of chick starter for like 2 months, rather than several small ones along the way. It really does make more economical sense to just buy, more up front for a lower price that's going to last longer. So have some food so that your chickens will have something as soon as they get home. A food bowl. This is probably the least important thing on the list because it really doesn't matter. I just use something small and shallow. Make sure it's small enough that your little chicks can reach into it, and that's pretty much it. They're going to make a mess of it no matter what kind of feeder you have for them. So if you want to buy one of those ones from the store, you can, so the feeder doesn't really matter. The last one does, however, a waterer. So if you don't get a waterer that's specifically designed for this purpose, you're probably going to have problems. And unfortunately, I've known several people along the way who have said, oh, just get something like the food bowl, something shallow that they can just reach into, and then the chicks actually drown themselves in it. So make sure to buy something that works for watering your chickens. It's specifically designed for it. Mine has like a thing on the top where you fill it up and then a bottom to it, which you actually flip when you're cleaning it or filling it up. But then it just keeps this tiny little bit of water in the bottom, and then as they drink it, it can fill it up again. So it keeps nice, fresh, clean water flowing to the chicks, and it does not provide enough for them so that they can actually get into it, get soaking wet, and then get cold and die or drown themselves or anything else like that. And so while we're on the topic of this, if you're putting your chicks somewhere like a bathroom, And as they're getting bigger and they learn how to fly and stuff like that, make sure that they're staying away from all other water sources. So if you have dog bowls or the toilet or anything else, just be really careful to keep, you know, the lid shut or the dog bowls away from it, that sort of thing. Or you have a box that you can actually put like a top to where they can't fly out, because again, this is a really common problem actually, the chicks that, you know, drown themselves. So just be really careful about that. So as long as you have these 6 things in place, their housing, their heat, their bedding, their food, a food bowl, and the waterer, you are ready to buy your chicks.